In the quiet outskirts of a sprawling Texas ranch where wide-open skies met endless fields, a power-hungry HOA, Karen thought she could bully her way into enforcing petty rules on a property that wasn't even hers. But what she didn't know was that the man she called the cops on was the very overseer of every HOA in the county, and her meddling was about to unravel her entire empire in the most satisfying way imaginable. If you're loving these wild HOA nightmare stories that end with epic karma, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the next tale of entitled neighbors getting their comeuppance. Let's dive right in. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the vast expanse of Rolling Hills Ranch, a property that had been in the Thompson family for generations. At 52, Elias Thompson was a man of quiet authority, his weathered hands testament to years spent tending cattle, mending fences, and overseeing the land that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ranch wasn't just a home, it was a legacy, free from the suffocating grip of suburban regulations that plagued the nearby developments. Elias had built his life here, away from the noise of city life. But on this particular afternoon, that peace was shattered by the arrival of an uninvited guest. Margaret Hargrove, known locally as the iron-fisted president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, pulled up in her gleaming SUV, her face already twisted in disapproval. She had heard rumors of unsightly structures on the ranch, barns that didn't match the aesthetic of the adjacent neighborhood, even though the ranch predated the subdivision by decades. Margaret, a woman in her late 40s with a penchant for perfectly coiffed hair and clipboard authority, believed it was her duty to extend her HOA's influence beyond its borders. She marched up to the fence line, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth, and began snapping photos of the old red barn that stood proudly against the skyline. Elias, spotting her from afar while he repaired a gate, approached with a measured stride, his cowboy hat shading his eyes from the glaring sun. He greeted her politely, inquiring about her presence on his land, but Margaret waved him off, declaring that the barn violated visual harmony standards and demanded he repaint it immediately or face fines. Elias chuckled inwardly, knowing full well that his ranch was exempt from any such nonsense. But he chose to remain calm, explaining the property lines and suggesting she check her maps. Undeterred, Margaret's temper flared. She accused him of being a stubborn holdout ruining the community's property values. As Elias turned to walk away, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice rising in feigned panic as she reported a trespasser harassing her, twisting the narrative to paint Elias as the aggressor on his own soil. Sirens wailed in the distance within minutes, drawing the attention of ranch hands who paused their work to watch the unfolding drama. 2 deputies arrived, their patrol car kicking up dust on the gravel road, and approached the scene with cautious professionalism. Margaret pointed accusingly at Elias, recounting her fabricated tale of intimidation, while Elias stood firm, his arms crossed, offering his identification and a brief explanation of the misunderstanding. The deputies, recognizing Elias from community meetings, he was, after all, the county's appointed overseer of all homeowners associations, a role he'd held for over a decade, listened patiently. This position, granted by the state due to his expertise in land management and dispute resolution, gave him unparalleled insight and authority over HOA operations across multiple developments, including Whispering Pines. The deputies quickly diffused the situation, advising Margaret that she was the one out of bounds and suggesting she leave before charges of false reporting could be considered. Humiliated but unbowed, she stormed back to her vehicle, vowing under her breath that this wasn't over. Elias watched her go, a faint smile playing on his lips, knowing that her call had just opened a Pandora's box she couldn't close. Back at the ranch house that evening, as the stars blanketed the sky, Elias sat at his desk reviewing the day's events. He pulled up the county records on his computer, his role allowing him access to HOA filings, complaints, and audits. Whispering Pines had been on his radar for months. Reports of overzealous enforcement, unfair fines, and even allegations of fund mismanagement had trickled in from disgruntled residents. Margaret's stunt today provided the perfect catalyst to dig deeper. He made a few calls to his contacts in the state attorney general's office, flagging the incident as potential abuse of emergency services tied to HOA harassment. The next morning, Elias drove into town for a scheduled meeting with the county board. where he casually mentioned the encounter, sparking interest among officials who valued his balanced oversight. Whispers of an investigation began to circulate, though Margaret remained blissfully unaware, basking in her self-perceived victory as she rallied her HOA board to draft a formal complaint against the ranch. Days turned into weeks and the ranch returned to its rhythmic routine, cattle grazing under the watchful eyes of Elias and his team. But beneath the surface, wheels were turning. Elias compiled a dossier on Whispering Pines, excessive fees for minor infractions like unapproved flower colors, secret meetings excluding members, and questionable expenditures on Margaret's personal association events. One resident had even submitted evidence of altered minutes to cover up votes against her policies. Elias's oversight role empowered him to recommend audits, and with the 911 call as leverage, he pushed for a full review. The state obliged, notifying the HOA of an impending investigation. Margaret received the letter at her manicured home, her face paling as she read the details. Accusations of misconduct, potential violations of state laws governing associations. She dismissed it as a bluff, perhaps orchestrated by that rancher, but doubt crept in. She called emergency board meetings, urging unity against external threats, but cracks were forming. Residents, tired of her reign, began sharing stories anonymously online, fueling a local forum buzz that caught Elias's attention. He monitored it discreetly, ensuring his involvement remained behind the scenes. As autumn leaves began to fall, the audit team arrived at Whispering Pines, poring over records in the community clubhouse. Margaret hovered nervously, her usual bravado faltering under scrutiny. Discrepancies emerged. Funds siphoned for her luxury car lease disguised as maintenance, fines collected without proper documentation. The 911 incident was highlighted as evidence of harassment tactics, potentially criminal. Elias, attending as overseer, observed from the sidelines, his presence a silent reminder of the web she'd woven. The findings were damning, recommending dissolution if reforms weren't immediate. Panic spread through the neighborhood. Some residents cheered quietly, others feared chaos without structure. Margaret fought back, hiring a lawyer to contest the audit, but the evidence was ironclad. Elias, in his report to the county, emphasized the need for accountability, subtly noting how her actions at the ranch exemplified broader abuses. The board deliberated, and as winter approached, a decision loomed that could change everything. The community held its breath, unaware that the man they'd seen as a simple rancher held the key to their liberation. Snow dusted the fields of Rolling Hills Ranch, transforming the landscape into a serene winter wonderland, but the chill in the air mirrored the frost settling over Whispering Pines. Elias Thompson rose early, as always, tending to his herd with the same steadfast routine that had defined his life. His oversight duties had intensified since the audit's revelations, with daily calls from state officials seeking his input on the HOA's fate. Margaret Hargrove, meanwhile, was unraveling, her once impeccable facade cracked as neighbors distanced themselves, whispering about the scandals unearthed. The audit report, now public, detailed a litany of infractions: embezzlement through inflated vendor contracts, discriminatory enforcement targeting lower-income families, and even forged signatures on covenant amendments. Margaret's lawyer argued procedural errors, but the momentum was against her. Elias, reviewing the documents in his cozy ranch office, noted how her 911 call had been the tipping point. Recorded dispatch logs showed her exaggerating threats, classifying it as a misdemeanor misuse of services. Prosecutors were considering charges, adding fuel to the dissolution fire. In the subdivision, meetings turned chaotic. Residents formed factions, some loyal to Margaret's vision of uniformity, others clamoring for freedom from her petty tyrannies. Elias attended one such gathering incognito, blending into the crowd in plain clothes, listening as voices rose in frustration over years of suppressed grievances. He gathered more intel, feeding it back to the county board anonymously to avoid bias accusations. As the holidays neared, Margaret launched a desperate PR campaign, distributing flyers painting the audit as a witch hunt by outsiders jealous of their pristine community. She even attempted to rally support by targeting the ranch again, claiming Elias's land was a blight that lowered values, a claim debunked by recent appraisals showing the opposite. Elias responded not with confrontation but strategy. He hosted a town hall at the county center, where he presented facts on healthy HOA practices, subtly contrasting them with Whispering Pines' failures. Attendees, including disillusioned members, nodded in agreement, shifting public opinion. The state attorney general's office, impressed by Elias's thoroughness, expedited the process. By mid-January, a formal hearing was set, with Margaret subpoenaed to testify. She arrived at the courthouse in her best suit, her nerves betraying her through trembling hands clutching prepared statements. Elias sat in the oversight panel, his expression neutral as evidence was presented. Bank statements, resident testimony submitted in writing, and that infamous 911 transcript. The panel grilled her on specifics: why fines for holiday lights exceeded guidelines, how association dues funded personal trips. Margaret deflected, blaming clerical errors, but the facade crumbled when a former board member provided emails exposing her directives. The hearing stretched over days, each revelation eroding her credibility. Back at the ranch, Elias reflected on the irony. The woman who sought to control others had lost grip on her own domain. As February's winds howled, the panel deliberated, with Elias's recommendation weighing heavily. He advocated for disbandment, citing irreparable trust erosion and legal violations. The verdict came swiftly. Whispering Pines HOA was to be dissolved, its assets liquidated to refund members, and Margaret barred from future leadership roles. She left the courthouse in defeat, her SUV speeding away as reporters snapped photos. The neighborhood erupted in mixed reactions, relief for many, uncertainty for others. Elias assisted in the transition, helping form a voluntary community group focused on cooperation rather than coercion. Months passed, spring bringing renewal to the land. The ranch flourished, its barn standing unaltered as a symbol of independence. Former residents approached Elias with gratitude, sharing how the dissolution lifted financial burdens and restored neighborly peace. Margaret, stripped of power, sold her home quietly, moving to a distant city where her reputation couldn't follow. Elias, ever humble, returned to his daily labors, his oversight role reinforced by the successful intervention. Yet as summer approached, whispers of similar issues in neighboring associations reached him, hinting at new challenges on the horizon. Summer sun baked the earth at Rolling Hills Ranch, where Elias Thompson oversaw the bustling activity of hay baling and livestock rotations, his life a blend of tradition and quiet influence. The dissolution of Whispering Pines had sent ripples through the county, with other HOAs scrutinizing their practices under Elias's watchful eye. Margaret Hargrove's downfall became local legend, a cautionary tale of overreach, but for Elias, it was closure on a chapter sparked by that fateful 911 call. The former subdivision, now free from mandatory rules, thrived in organic harmony. Neighbors organized voluntary cleanups, shared resources without fines, and property values actually rose, proving Margaret's fears unfounded. Elias received commendations from the state for his handling, solidifying his role as the go-to arbiter for association disputes. He expanded his oversight, implementing workshops on ethical governance, drawing attendees from across the region. One evening, as fireflies danced in the twilight, Elias sat on his porch reflecting on how a single act of entitlement had dismantled an oppressive system. The ranch remained untouched, a beacon of autonomy amid growing suburbs. Years later, the story circulated online, inspiring others to challenge unjust HOAs, with Elias anonymously contributing tips to forums. Peace settled over the land, but Elias knew vigilance was key. New Karens could emerge, yet armed with experience, he stood ready. The cycle of land and legacy continued, unbroken. Thanks for sticking around for this epic HOA takedown tale. If it got your blood pumping with that sweet revenge vibe, drop a like, subscribe for more insane neighbor drama, and comment below with your own HOA horror stories. We'll see you in the next one.